Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Invin. Today I wanted to bring you guys a video on the best weapon combos in New World that you must know before we go into open beta and into full launch. Now for anybody that hasn't played the game, this video here is going to teach you about which weapons scale off the same attributes or similar attributes so that you can maximize your points of damage in them. And for those of you that have played the game, I'm going to go over why certain weapons work together, so not only based off the attributes but based off the playstyle and the way that these weapons work a lot. Now for anybody that has watched a few PvP videos on here on YouTube, or maybe they've seen some streams of some PvP content, there's certain weapons that shine through in that content that maybe don't shine through in PvE and vice versa. So I'm going to go over some good picks for each of those, as well as looking into the wars a little bit more in depth as well, because they also have specific weapons that work a lot better, that aren't really necessarily the best ones overall, but work a lot better for wars. So we're going to jump into it here. The first one you're going to see is actually the straight sword, so the sword and the shield, and pairing this with either the Great Axe or the Warhammer. Now the reason for this is that the straight sword or the sword and shield scales off strength and dexterity, as you guys can see on screen here. And then with things like the Great Axe, that is solely strength, and the Warhammer, that is solely strength as well. Now because the main stat on the sword and shield is actually the strength over the dexterity, that means that it's not 1-for-1 points, it's 0.9 for every strength stat and 0.65 for every dexterity stat point. But this does mean that primarily it's going to scale off of strength, so that if you are building up those gears, primarily with sword and shield, you're going to be doing the tanking role, so you're probably going to put a lot of your attribute points into constitution. But for any pieces of gear or any points that you do want to put into a little bit of damage, if you're focusing on strength, pairing them with the Warhammer or the Great Axe is going to work really, really well. Now my personal preference for this is actually the Warhammer, simply because it's got a lot of CC, which is going to mean as you are tanking, it can generate a lot of threat with your sword and shield, and then switch to the Warhammer over here, where you'll be able to do a lot of CC, a lot of lockdown abilities, which is going to be very, very nice. But I do also really like the Great Axe, and the reason for that is it gives you a bit more maneuverability. It does give you the chance to actually gain some HP back when you're doing some attacks as well, and it can also be quite a high damage dealer if you do scale that strength off quite a bit. If you're going for maybe a hybrid bruiser class where you've got half constitution, half strength, this is going to be a really, really good option. So kind of depends on what your playstyle is, but for me, that is one of the best combinations of weapons. Now the next one I'm going to look at here is the Rapier, and this one obviously scales off dexterity and intelligence. So there's a couple of different builds you can do with this one. You can obviously scale it off its primary stat, which is the most desirable way to do it. That means that you can scale it with something very nicely like the bow, which is solely dexterity, so that works really, really nice. As well as this, the musket, which is dexterity and intelligence as well, works really, really well. But for the Rapier, a lot of people use this secondary stat here of intelligence and pair it with something like the Fire Staff, which is solely intelligence, or indeed the Ice Gauntlet, which is solely intelligence, and use the secondary stat of the Rapier as a close weapon when they've got the staff or the gauntlet in their hand, because obviously that's range, magic attacks, maybe you're running low on mana, switch to the Rapier, do some close range damage, and this thing can absolutely burst, even with a lot of spec into that intelligence attribute there. So you're going to be able to do a lot of damage with this combination. So Rapier, Fire Staff, or Rapier and Ice Gauntlet is going to do very, very good, and as you all have seen in a lot of PvP videos, that combination is particularly lethal. The reason for that is if you use the Fire Staff, you've got a lot of movement abilities, a lot of AoE stuff where you can get around people, and you're going to do tick damage with that burning damage. If you go with the Ice Gauntlet, you've got a lot of slows, a lot of stuns, kind of where people walk through it and they're going to slow down in this ice storm area. Or you've got the pylon, which does damage when even when you're not attacking it, it attacks the enemy for you, which is really nice. So people, if they don't kill that straight away, are going to take a decent amount of damage there. And then obviously pairing it with the Rapier, where you are able to just go in and burst damage. If you've got riposte on there as well, this will allow you to riposte the attack, which means you can counter attack them, and you can then go into another combo with that as well, which is really, really nice, and can mean you can get a ton of damage out very, very quickly. So really good weapon combination. Now sticking on the theme of intelligence weapons and magic weapons, you can also pair it with the musket with one of these staffs, but again, that's two long range options. So for me personally, I prefer pairing one of the staff or the gauntlet with the Rapier, but also the staff and the gauntlet pair together really, really well and work in good synergy, because again, you're switching between two. You've got the slows and you've got the kind of crowd control damage from the Ice Gauntlet. You switch to the fire staff and you've got a lot of damage output. You've got the dots, so the burning damage, which will damage them over time, which is really nice. And you've also got the movement ability if you do want to get that there as well. You can go ahead and get yourself this burnout ability, which will mean you can dash forward, and that is really, really good for either attacking enemies, going through them and attacking them, or escaping or repositioning during a fight as well. Now, another combo that seems to be one of the most popular PvP combos at the moment is actually the spear paired with the bow. Now, obviously, the bow's primary stat is dexterity. It's its only stat, and the spear is dexterity strength. So again, if you're going to scale solely dexterity, this is a really, really good build. Now, the bow's got a ton of good abilities, things like evade shot, where you can jump backwards while you're shooting and deal a good amount of weapon damage to them. You've got rain of arrows, which is an AoE one, so you can go ahead and do a decent amount of damage there. Poison shot, which is really good and can be used as a gap closer or a gap creator. You've also then got rapid shot, which is kind of nice, not as good as the other ones, but does do work. Penetrating shot again can be good in certain situations, and splinter shot. So you've got a lot of good choice with this one, and you can dodge roll with this, and when you do dodge roll, if you're wearing light armor, you then get a boost in speed afterwards for a few seconds. So it's just a really good dodging about class. Paired with something like the spear, you're going to have a lot of CC from the spear. You can knock people down, you can stun lock them for a few seconds, so you're going to have really good close range and really good long range abilities, which is going to put you at the forefront of PvP. Now, this works really well 1v2, 1v1, 1v3, anything like that, but in the wars it can be a little bit more tedious, so you'll have to respec to make sure you get things like the poison shot for those AoE bow skills, because the spear is really good one-on-one, but not particularly great when there's multiple enemies there, so it's kind of weighing it up. And finally here, coming into another one that's kind of good, it's the life staff. Now, life staff obviously is brilliant, focuses off just focus itself, and obviously if you're a healer, you've kind of got to go with this one. A lot of people have enjoyed pairing it with the sword and shield for kind of a paladin style build. A lot of other players have gone with the ice gauntlet for the utility, the slows, all that kind of good stuff. Some have even gone with some close range weapons like the hatchet or the warhammer. The warhammer I've seen quite a lot of people use for the stun locks. They've gone with all the CC abilities and use that when people do dive on them or people try to attack them. They stun lock them, move back, get somebody else to help them out and keep dropping those heals. Works really, really well. Depends on your playstyle, what you want to rock there, but it's also worth mentioning. Now, when we are looking at things like wars or large scale PvP events, the things with AoE abilities are going to be your best combos. So the life stuff is obviously a necessity for healers. You can't get around that. I would recommend pairing that with the Warhammer for wars though, just for those CC locks. You've also got a really good pairing with the Fire Staff and the Ice Gauntlet. That's going to work really well. You just want to make sure that you take things like Meteor Shower so that you've got that AoE ability. And also when you're using the Ice Gauntlet, you're going to want to make sure that you've got the Ice Storm ability so that you're getting that AoE. They're going to be really, really important abilities during the wars, because not a lot of classes have AoE abilities, or a lot of weapons, sorry, have AoE abilities. So that's going to be really, really vital. If you are going to play the bow, you're going to want to make sure that you've got poison shot on again, because it does a little barrage there, as well as rain of arrows, because again, this is an AoE ability, which is brilliant. If you're going to be using some of the melee weapons here, like in the closed beta, I was running hatchet and great axe personally, which is an absolutely exceptional combo, and I'm going to go on to this in just a moment because it's my favorite one. The hatchet works really, really well for single target damage, and can also be really good if you get 1 point into aim and throw here as well, where you can throw hatchets. You're going to do a lot of damage to multiple people, particularly when they're on a point. And then pairing this with the great axe, you're going to have a decent amount of mobility, a decent amount of health, being able to heal, and you're going to be able to do a lot of crit damage if you level up some of these perks here where they give you bonus crit to lower HP enemies. You're going to be able to come in and execute some of those people very, very quickly, whilst also being very quick with the hatchet. So it can be a nice, nifty class. If you have got some of these where they're not really AoE abilities, they're more single target, you've got to just focus the low HP people and drop between those to try and help your team out as best you can. So it's playing to the advantages of your class, but that's going to be kind of like your best option there. Now, like I said before, if you are wanting a melee class with a bit of AoE capability, the Warhammer is going to be one of your best bets, because you're going to have a decent amount of stuffs like Shockwave, where you can lock people down, as well as Clear Out, which can be really useful for knocking certain very tanky enemies off an objective so that you can kill some of the squishier ones that are on there, and then overpower the enemies that way. Can be really, really useful. Not necessarily an AoE ability, but it is a very, very good utility ability with this weapon. So again, if you're scaling off strength, really good to have this on your class when you are going to do the wars. Now, the Spear as well can also be very good. Sweep particularly is decent because it does knock an enemy down, which is really good. Same here with the Javelin, because you knock someone over, and that's going to mean in a war situation you're probably going to get 2 or 3 other people rotating on that player whilst they're down, putting out a decent amount of damage, either getting that kill or forcing that player to back up and regain health. So either way, you're helping your team win an advantage in that fight, and that's what's going to be really important here. Now, like I briefly mentioned just a second ago, my very favourite setup at the moment, or very favourite combo is actually going to be the hatchet, which obviously is strength and dexterity, with the great axe, which is primarily strength. So the build for this that I went with was a point allocation in the attributes, 3 to strength and 1 to constitution. That's because I wanted to be a little bit more tanky than I was, but you can just go full strength with this build as well. I did get some dexterity off of my gear pieces. I aimed to get around 50 so that I would get the attribute bonus for the critical strike chance off the dexterity there as well. But the hatchet worked really well, particularly the berserk. Obviously you get that increases attack damage. The second perk you get there is the movement speed, heal yourself, all of that good stuff. So it works really, really well. And like I did mention there before as well, I did go for aimed throw, particularly for those PvP environments where when you've got 2 melee weapons, people try to take advantage by stepping backwards. If you're able to then turn around and start throwing axes at them, they're going to be a bit more worried, and you might even be able to kill people while they're running away with this ability, because you are able to then just hit them from a distance, particularly when you pair this with the great axe. If you go for something like charge, where you can close the gap, you can get very close, maybe get a couple melee hits out, they pop one of their gap abilities so they can get away a little bit, and you're throwing axe them down, is going to be very, very satisfying, and you're going to do really well in PvP encounters with this. Not to mention in the wars, it is super, super useful. Now, my kind of main ability for the wars when I was using the great axe was, of course, to use gravity well here. It does create a vortex that pulls people towards the center, and again, this just means that your AoE ability users, so your mages and some of your Warhammer users, can get in there, stun lock players, do a lot of AoE damage, and your single target damage can pick out those squishy guys that do get grabbed by it and output a lot of damage very, very quickly, which makes this synergy very, very good, because not only can you drop this, but then if you've got the hatchet as well yourself, you can go in there and do some serious damage with the hatchet very quickly as well, which means you can self-sustain with a lot of health from getting the health regen from berserk, as well as the health regen from the passives on the great axe. And you're also going to be putting out a very good amount of damage when you're scaling your attributes into strength. So that was my favourite build from closed beta. I'm going to try out some of the more magic builds in the open beta. So I'm going to go for a mage setup with ice and fire staff. I'm also going to look at maybe going some points into focus and seeing how the healer specs up. And I'm just going to try out a few different builds so I can bring you guys kind of my top 3 setups for what you should be rocking when you do get into the game, if you want to go for like the best DPS or whatever, because I think that's going to be really important to see. But again, it all comes down to playstyle and what you prefer playing. So those have just been some of my best recommendations for weapon pairings, weapon synergies in New World, especially for those of you that haven't had a chance to play the game yet. The weapons that I've suggested pairing together scale off at least 1 stat the same, or if they've just got a soul stat, one of the weapons will just be off that soul stat, which means when you level it, all your points are going to go into it. It's basically making the most out of the attribute points you spend and getting the most out of a weapon in return. So hopefully you guys have found it useful. If you have, please do be sure to drop a like on the video down below, as that really does help me out. If you are new to the channel, you'd like to see more New World content, then please do drop a subscribe to the channel down below with the notification bell on so that you don't miss any uploads. And of course, if you would like to join the community outside of YouTube, head over and join the Discord. The link is in the description and in the comments down below. If you'd like to become a channel member, we do have that option available now too. Thanks to being partnered. Thanks for all your support for that. If you'd like to look at the options there, click the join button down below so you can see what we've got on offer there. And other than that, as always, thank you very much for watching, guys. Take care and peace.